What is the most important commodity in the world? Well, if you ask those in the financial industry, they might suggest oil. In this video today, we're going to talk about oil. We'll expand on it. And if you stick with me throughout this video, I am going to show you the biggest fundamental change that has happened right now that's going to affect everybody globally. This is huge. I'm asking you to stick around as we cover oil. My name is David Quintieri, and in these videos, I bring you the truth about money. I explain each and every detail, taking all the complex stuff, making it real simple. Let's talk about oil today. Here we begin. Here's why oil flows can only be redirected and not stopped. We are talking about Russia in this article here, as well as other countries, as we'll talk about in depth throughout the video. There's this divide in between East and West that I want to highlight, and it really is showing up with oil. So what's happening here? Well, as I'm sure you know, this war between Russia and Ukraine has created some very, let's call it some interesting dynamics in relation to oil. So you had previously Russia supplying all the oil, all the natural gas, let's send it over to Europe. They're buying it all. They were loving that relationship. And then what happened was, or I could say on the other side was, India and China were buying a small percentage of that from Russia. As soon as the war began, then basically Europe said, we're going to punish Russia. We don't want their stuff anymore. So Russia said, okay, I got an idea here. Hey, India, hey, China, would you like a discount on your oil? India said, yeah, I'll take that. And that's what's been going on. In fact, the percentages are quite massive. Let me show you that. In this article here, they basically talk about it. They're quoting from Bloomberg. But essentially, now China and India are the two biggest buyers of Russian crude. The two together took in as much as 80% of Russia's total oil exports last month. Unbelievable. So people had said, yeah, these countries, they don't really like each other. They don't really fight each other. Well, they really fight with each other long term. And this is not, well, look, the BRICS nations, they might have differences, just like every other country has differences. Britain kind of had some differences with the United States. I would think so. At least long-term battles, But you see what they're doing now today, and in my opinion, you got that Anglo-American, let's call it a axis, or maybe the Anglo-American, the way that they have built themselves over the years, and they have a relationship. So we see that. But in this case, these BRICS nations are doing more business than ever before. Europe, which placed an embargo on direct Russian oil and fuel imports, has been taking in more fuels made in Asia, notably India. In fact, it seems to be taking in a lot of these fuels. If the top diplomat out of the EU had to call publicly for an end to this practice. You see what's happening here? So in this way, Russia stands to gain. Do you see what's going on? And now what I'm seeing is what they're calling a new world order, and specifically for the purposes of this video, in its relation to oil. We'll talk more about that here. It's an interesting look at all of this, and I do believe for most people, they're going to gloss over it. But understand how important this is geopolitically. There's a big shift that's going on today. First thing here, the total number of total active drilling rigs in the United States fell. And I'll show you some charts here in just a second. But what I see happening is a problem that's going on in the United States where they can be supposedly self-sufficient in terms of their needs for energy. But at the same time, you're seeing fewer and fewer and fewer rigs. Why don't we look at the numbers. So the green line there, that is the rig count. So that rig count has been declining. At the same time, we're seeing the amount of jobs, industry, oil, and gas, they've been increasing. It's odd, right? I mean, why would that be happening? You can look at that total production. I mean, look at the crude oil total production. That blue line. It's kind of peaked out, remaining steady, and yet the rig count has been declining. Something's not going on here. Employment's increasing, the total production is staying level, and yet the rig count has been declining. This is a chart that brings us back to 2002, showing us that rig count, just to give you a little bit of a look historically. And then this as well, just zoomed in, showing us that, you know, kind of where we were back in the 2020 timeframe before it dropped off. We're below that level now. So it's signaling something is going on. And that's for the United States. So what the United States is doing right now is they are sending a lot of these things, their oil, gas, they want to bring that to Europe. They want to feed Europe because they have to. And so this is a time in which you would think they would just be like, let's take advantage, let's take advantage. But I think a lot of these companies, they either don't find it profitable, they don't like the idea of putting it on a ship and sending it over. Maybe logistically it's challenging, maybe it's costing too much in that way. They want pipelines, they want to do business that way. Maybe they're getting, you know, all the regulations or all the difficulties that they're being, you know, dealing with. That's what's going on so many different levels. I think a lot of these companies are just not going to take advantage of that because maybe they think, hey, tomorrow if this gets resolved, what are we going to do? This could be so many different things. But this is the big one for today. 3 new China, Russia, Iran, and Iraq agreements confirm the new oil market order. Remember, whenever I talk about something here on this channel, I'm quoting. That was their quote. This new oil market order. Moscow signed 10 new cooperation agreements with Iran for the oil sector alone on the 18th of May. China waited for the dust to settle before it too signed new cooperation agreements with Iran on the 23rd of May. So right away, China's doing it. Moscow's doing it. Russia's doing it. Look at that. China has significantly expanded its influence in the Middle East in order to secure sufficient hydrocarbon supplies to fuel its economic growth. There is a line in the sand, pun intended, of what's going on in countries, let's say from Saudi Arabia and beyond, where we can see that Saudi and China are doing business. Russia, China, the BRICS nations as a whole are doing business all together, and they want to do it away from the US dollar. Do you understand how critical this is? People will say, yeah, right, never going to happen. I've got all my money invested in the United States, all the stocks. I only have US dollars. I got my house. I got way too much debt, but of course it's good debt. All of that. Oh, but you know, this problem, this huge fundamental change can't happen because that's normalcy bias. Well, is it going to happen overnight? Absolutely not. No way. But is there a change happening? Yes. There's no question about that. And people don't have to change necessarily what they're investing in and these things. But if you are not realizing that this is a shift that happens in which 30 years, 20 years down the road, you're going to be in a completely different world. You understand this? It's a completely different world. One that doesn't have one player at the top. It's not going to be that. It's going to be a multipolar world. They've been saying this and they've been working on it. It's not just talk. They've been making it happen. Look at what could happen when you've got these countries where they would previously be one-trick ponies. Maybe that's United Arab Emirates. Maybe that's, you know, some of these other countries, even Saudi. They're saying we don't want to do just oil stuff. we want to have tourism, we want to build buildings, and we want to do this and that, and we want to attract all these people and investment. Look at what Saudi's doing. They got the LIV Gulf. They've got like all these new projects in order to get billions and millions and even beyond that into different investment vehicles at a time in which think about that 20 years ago or 10 years ago, that would never have been suggested. Never. And now it's just, yeah, of course, sure. So you can see what's happening. A lot of the world is changing, and they're willing to not do all of their business with the United States. They're saying, yeah, let's do it. Let's do it, China. Let's make it happen, United Arab Emirates. People are now looking at it very differently. Very differently. And Europe, when you look at a total population, understand that population together as a whole, compare that to the United States. And you could see it's much more balanced in this way. And Europe is really, in most cases, willing to do business with China. So it's a different world. It is a very different world. And this change is going to impact everyone's lives. And we'll talk more about some of that and what you have to understand as an investor. Would you like that? Stick with me, okay? I got something for you. Petrobras looks to grow oil production outside of Brazil. This is one big company, state-owned, and essentially saying that, hey, we haven't had any big discoveries more than a decade. We want to do some discoveries outside. It shows me that a lot of the easy oil, this is what I wrote about in 2012, by the way, in my book, my first book. If you're willing to go to the lengths of, fracking, if you're willing to go into the middle of the ocean and dig a well, these are very difficult things to do, okay? And they have lots of problems. If you're willing to do that, it means that you don't have the easy oil. That's just the way I see it. If it was easier to get somewhere else, they would do it. And then just really quickly, I want to talk about uranium because people don't understand how valuable this is going to become. It's already valuable, but how valuable it's going to become when it gets labeled as part of this nonsense ESG. And these countries continue, they're already doing it, but throw billions and billions into it as they say, you know what? We're going to do a lot more nuclear, a lot more. Biggest uranium companies by 2021 production. Look around there, bottom of the list, you see Cameco, that's Canada, one of the biggest in the world, okay? One of the biggest in the world. That's one that benefited a little while ago when we kind of had that surge. Uranium One out of Russia, Orano out of France, and then, of course, Kazakhstan just dominating in that respect, okay? So you could see these others on the list if you want to check it out. China's got some. You got to realize like this is going to be much more important than what it is today. Global primary energy production from nuclear, that's starting to, that orange line, you could see it right there, primary energy production from nuclear is starting to increase again. And then the blue line is the nuclear percentage of the total primary energy production. That is kind of flatlined. So I'm interested to see what happens over the next little while. I think they're going to start turning on a lot of the older ones. They said they're going to decommission. I think they're going to keep those going, and I think they're going to build new ones. I think that's what's going to happen here. Largest 10 uranium mines in the world by 2021 production. Look at around. Kazakhstan is part of that, and you could see it for yourself on there, okay? So that was it really for uranium. Just understand that this is an extremely valuable resource, and you can invest in that directly through an ETF. There are a couple of those, and there are also a lot of companies that are benefiting from this potentially, as long as nuclear is going forward. So we'll see what happens. This is really what I'm talking about here. You want to know this kind of information. You want to be able to just have that in your brain, turn it on in 2 seconds. This is the video for you, okay? I broke that all down right here. Click it, and I'll see you there.